Welcome, everybody. My name is Jeff Amrine. I'm the managing director and founder of the Startup Junkie, and we work closely with our partners, The Conductor. Welcome to our digital library. During the course of many different episodes that we're going to feature, you're going to learn about Lean Canvas, how to run a startup, how to build a startup, customer discovery, and a variety of other topics. Welcome. We hope you enjoy it.
All right, so you're starting a startup, or at least you're dreaming about it. You may have an idea that you're super excited about, and throughout the day, you are jotting down ideas and thinking about logo designs and all the different features that could potentially go into it. And you're super excited about the potential for making something that could grow into a real business. It's an exciting time, and it's actually one of the things that I love the most about the startup process. But in that time, it's really important that you think about what are the things that are going to get you to the first step to actually starting a company. And this is really important. And it's something that I've learned through my experiences as an entrepreneur that can save you a lot of time and heartache if you do first. And that thing is building something that is something that people want or something that people love, that is a minimum viable product that you can expand upon further down your journey. This is a really important aspect to understand because throughout your entrepreneurial journey, you may iterate and pivot your idea multiple times. I'm sure you've heard the old adage that ideas are a dime a dozen, and it's really true. You may have thousands of ideas that you want to test and experiment with, but you only have a limited number of hours in the day to get things done and a limited number of resources to be able to do that. My name's Jordan Carlisle, and I'm here to help you build a minimum viable product. Throughout my career, I've helped over 1,000 entrepreneurs work through the early stages of their businesses, and I've also applied these tactics to my own startups and experiences. And so, what we're going to focus on today are very simple, tactical things that you can take away. They're going to enable you to put things into action and actually get your idea off the ground. So, a few quick points around why it's important to focus your energy early on and some of the downsides of not focusing your energy early on. So 4 points that I'm going to make the case for why a minimum viable product or the earliest version of your product is important to develop and understand. And point number one is you want to really understand what your customers or your potential customers need. And ideally, you want to build something that is so valuable to them that they end up falling in love with your product. You also want to figure out what are the essential things that your early customers are willing to pay for. Because when you're early on in a startup, it's really easy to think of thousands and thousands of ideas that would be really cool features. And that could be coming from feedback from your potential customers or ideas that you have with you and your co-founders. When you can hone in on the minimum viable experience that your customers are willing to pay for and hopefully continue to pay for, then you're on the right track to building a product that people are willing to adopt and love and promote in the long run. And ultimately, if you are building a startup that you plan on scaling, you may need to raise capital along the way. And if you don't have that minimum viable product that is enabling you to generate traction and generate sales, you're going to have a much more difficult time raising money. And in fact, it's probably not a good idea for you to raise money if you haven't figured out that minimum viable experience that you can use the capital to grow. A few downsides for not building a minimum viable product that I've personally experienced that I hope that you can avoid. So number one is wasting your time. So if you build something that people inherently don't want, if you spend months or years possibly doing that, you're wasting a lot of precious, valuable time that you could be working on other things. And if ultimately you want to be a successful entrepreneur, your goal is to start a real business. And what would help you start a real business is trying more ideas that help you get to that point. So don't waste your time on building something that people don't want. Second point that I'm going to make that can save you a lot of pain and heartache is having a minimum viable product or that core experience is essential to being able to retain customers. So hopefully when you launch something, you can quickly learn, are people willing to pay and are they willing to do that in the long run? Because if you spend a lot of time building something and then people only pay for it once and then drop off, you're going to spend all of your time trying to sell that product. And then your time and energy won't be spent on continuing to refine that product. So if you can build something that is core to what your customer needs first, then you're much more likely to build a product that sticks with that customer throughout the lifetime of that customer relationship. It's also really tough if you're trying to build a team early on and you don't know exactly what you should be focusing on. So having that core thing to build and test really quickly is going to motivate you, your co-founders, and potentially your early employees to rally around that one thing. The worst case scenario is that if you have a product with maybe 10 to 20 different features early on, and you have a team of 3 to 5 people, it's going to be really tough for your team to focus on building a really quality experience on one thing. And more likely than not, they're going to get burnt out. And as a leader of a startup company, it's going to be tougher for you to recruit really talented people to rally behind you. So by focusing that effort, you are going to bring people together around getting to that end goal of building something that people really love. The key takeaways so far that you should be focusing on for your minimum viable product are as follows. You should build something that is quick to build. So what I mean by that is it should take you weeks to build something, not months. You should think about getting something out as soon as possible to get in your customers' hands, because until they see something and are able to actually use it, it's going to be really difficult for them to give you the feedback to allow you to continue to iterate your product. This means that you need to focus on building limited functionality for that first experience. So what can you feasibly build in, say, 2 to 3 weeks? In some cases, if your idea requires a longer runway to actually build out, maybe just getting a landing page is enough to say that's your minimum viable product that allows you to communicate the core value of what you're trying to build and see how your potential customers respond to that, while also collecting information and emails from people who are interested that could potentially turn into customers. If you're building a hardware product, this could be prototyping something that visually shows what the larger product could be like, and asking questions around, does this particular product seem like it would solve your problem? I can't emphasize enough how important it is to do this process, even though it feels uncomfortable, because by getting that in front of people, you're going to move much more quickly, and you're going to feel the energy of what your customers that are giving you feedback say to go back and incorporate and continue to iterate. Another point that's important to focus on is thinking about a very small subset of users. So with your idea, can you think about who are the people that are most likely to really want this? Who do they work for? What environment are they in on a day-to-day basis? What age are they? What industries are they playing in? The more you can narrow down those key attributes about who you're building for and try to really focus in on one specific persona of that group, the more you're going to be able to understand the needs that you're trying to fulfill by building your product or service. This is also important because it's going to help you focus your time on getting in front of those people as quickly as possible. And then last of the 4 key takeaways so far is you want to build this initial experience so that you have a base to work from. If you get stuck in a mode of continually trying to build a product that needs a few more months to launch, or it's got to have just one more feature before it's right. We're all guilty of doing this. I'm guilty of that through my own startup experiences, where we extended a launch date because we felt like one more little feature could have helped us sell one more customer. And in reality, what would have helped us more was iterating more incrementally. So deploying a feature one step at a time and not bundling a bunch of features up all into one and trying to launch it at once. This helped us think more critically about what people were saying about that one specific feature, and it was easier to support smoothing out that experience as we iterated through that process to understand what wasn't going well so that we could fix it. So now that we've thought about what we need to accomplish to effectively get our MVP done, we know that talking to our customers and listening to their feedback is extremely important for thinking about what's that first experience we can build that's going to be valuable to them and potentially turn them into a customer. I want to touch on two specific directions that you can go at this point. And it's really relative to the type of idea that you're working on. So one direction may take you down an incremental path, while the other direction may be a more disruptive jump in terms of what you're building. So let me explain. Down a more incremental minimum viable product path, what you're doing is effectively listening to what your customers are currently already using from a products and services standpoint and thinking about what are the rough parts of that product or service experience that is essential to their day-to-day. And is there something in those products and services that you feel like you could potentially improve? So it's taking something that already exists and finding a way to incrementally make it better to make your potential customers' lives easier. While doing this, it can be easy to hear where this comes from because you can simply just listen to how your customers talk about products and services that they already use. Now, it's important to note that in this experience, sometimes people may say it would be cool that X feature and Y feature would be really cool if they integrated together. You have to be careful in these instances because as they're telling you this, it may be relative to their workflow, and it may not necessarily make sense for those things to actually work together, but they're just ideas in terms of what that potential customer has top of mind that they feel like is an urgent need for them. So it's important to note, but it's also important to understand that you don't want to just build everything that those customers say. Now, on the other side, if you're trying to build something that is a disruptive innovation or something that is going to entirely replace maybe processes or business models, you still want to talk to customers and you still want to learn what people are experiencing that you can solve problems for and listen for with a specific customer in mind. However, you're going to be much less likely to think about that product experience in its current form and try to iterate on top of it. And instead, you are trying to think of what's an entirely new way of doing business that could replace this current process that these people are using. Great example of this is Uber. So we know that Uber in many places around the world has completely replaced the need for taxi cab services. And people didn't really realize that they could potentially have a peer-to-peer taxi service by downloading a smartphone and booking a driver on demand. That wasn't necessarily a cab customer would have told you if you were to interview them. So with disruptive innovation, you have to be even more careful about not trying to directly implement exactly what your customers are saying to build that minimum viable product, but to draw inspiration from it to identify an opportunity in a market that you can then build an entirely new segment or industry around. So now, enough with all of the theory. Let's talk about something tactical that you can do right now today that's going to help you put all of this theory into practice. I'm going to give you a few tips on how to specify what your design should look like for a minimum viable product. So I'll remind you once again, we're thinking in weeks, not months, and we're trying to get something as quickly as possible to our customers that we can get feedback on. So to do that effectively, the first tip I have is to time box your specs or your specifications for what you're building. What I mean by that is every single task that you have that you feel like is going to add up to delivering that minimum viable product, write it down and determine how long you think it's going to take. If the aggregate of all of your tasks necessary to build that minimum viable product is beyond a few weeks, you're probably doing too much, which leads me into number two, which is cut your specifications. So after you write everything down thoroughly, go back through and start cutting things that are non-essential. Think critically about what are the first principal problems that your customer is having, and cut out anything else that is irrelevant to that. After you've cut down and narrowed down what you feel like are the most essential, the third step is getting more granular about what your specifications look like. So what I mean by this is writing in detail what your experience looks like as you go through the product with those specifications. So for example, what is your headline tag on your website going to say? What is the next step after that? Are they going to click through to an email sign up? Do they log in and create an account? What happens after they create an account? What's that first moment where they realize, here is the value that I'm getting out of this product, and what do you do next? So write those steps out very clearly before you ever start trying to build something. It's so much easier to edit in writing than it is to go back and try to rebuild architecture in, say, a software product or a physical product or a service implementation with people involved. Try to work those things out in writing before you get to that point, and you're going to save yourself a lot of time and hassle. And then the last tip that I'm going to leave you with is one of the most important, and it's one of the most difficult to overcome because you've gotten really excited about this idea that you're building, and you really want to help people in building this product. But most likely, whatever you put out there first is going to be really bad. And in fact, if you don't put out something that is almost kind of embarrassing in some way, shape, or form, you've probably waited too long. One of my favorite venture capitalists by the name of Reid Hoffman has a famous quote that he uses a lot, saying that if you're not embarrassed by the first version of your startup, then you launch too late. And it's so true. And that's coming from somebody who has a ton of experience investing in $1 billion companies over the course of 20 years. So if you can get your product out quickly and you can get feedback from your customers, make sure you're not too proud to hang on to whatever that experience looks like. You need to let go of your ego a little bit and take feedback from what your customers say and iterate away from whatever may not be necessary, and key in on what people are telling you that they really, really want, that is going to convert them into a paying customer. They're going to pay you over and over again in the long run, and they're going to fall in love with your product so that they tell all of their friends and coworkers and family about it, which is going to help you build a sustainably growing startup company. So I hope you take these ideas and you can apply them to your startup that you're working on. Once again, get out there, launch an MVP quickly, get feedback from real customers, try to see if you can actually sell them. And if it doesn't work, move on really quickly and keep iterating on that product until you find something that people love.